we have discussed the question of Nazism from within Ukraine and even touched on the evil Rusich unit of the Russian army, but do we actually have any point of reference regarding the stain of Nazism within Russia itself and the Putin government's direct involvement and relationship with it? Whilst the Kremlin and its vast trough of local and foreign propagandists have been going on about Yookro Nazis and the deep Nazi infestation within Kyiv, the Russian state was developing its own homegrown Nazis, whose evil and violence far exceeded anything found in Ukraine. The origins of this relationship date to the late 1990s, when Russia was hit by a wave of racism committed by neo-Nazi gangs. After Putin's accession to the presidency in 2000, his regime used this development to his benefit in two ways. Firstly, it used the neo-Nazi threat to justify the adoption of anti-extremism legislation, a long-standing demand of some Russian liberals. Ultimately and ironically, this legislation would be used to prosecute Russian Democrats, also known as Putin critics. Secondly, the Kremlin launched managed nationalism, an attempt to co-opt and mobilize these extreme nationalists, including neo-Nazis, as a counterweight to an emerging anti-Putin coalition of Democrats and leftist radicals. It was a pro-Putin youth organization, called Moving Together, that made the first move by reaching out to OB88, the most powerful skinhead gang in Russia. It was Moving Together that started a campaign against postmodernist literature, bringing frivolous cases against various authors. Just one step away from a Berlin book burning. This cooperation between state and Moving Together expanded in the aftermath of Ukraine's Orange Revolution of 2004. To insulate Russia against the contagion of pro-democracy protest, the Kremlin developed Moving Together into a more ambitious and more hardline project called Nazi. As part of the plan to curb a potential democratic uprising in Russia, Nazi enlisted football gang members, whose subculture completely overlapped with that of the neo-Nazis. During 2005, Nazi thugs staged a series of raids on anti-Putin youth groups. The most violent attack, which left 4 left-wing activists in hospital, led to the arrest of the assailants. They were released after a visit to the police station from Nikita Ivanov, the Kremlin functionary who supervised the regime's loyalist youth organizations. As a result, Nazi distanced itself from football gangs and its radical militant section migrated to 2 rival Kremlin proxies, the Nationalist Young Russia Group and the Anti-Immigration Locals Group. These organizations became bridges between the neo-Nazi groups and the Kremlin. In 2008 to 2009, the Kremlin was threatened by Russian opposition activist Alexei Navalny's efforts to build an anti-Putin coalition of Democrats and radical nationalists in Russia. In response, the Kremlin began to work with Ruski Obraz or RO, a hardcore neo-Nazi group. With the assistance of Kremlin supervisors, RO attacked nationalists who were abandoning the skinhead subculture for Navalny's anti-Putin coalition. In return, RO was granted privileged access to public space and the media. Its leaders held televised public discussions with state functionaries and collaborated openly with Maxim Mishchenko, a member of the Duma from the ruling party. The RO would enact numerous racially and politically motivated murders over a period. Some of their leaders would be prosecuted, but they would not lose their neo-Nazi beliefs and remain strongly tied to the Kremlin. Whilst the numbers of RO members is unknown, the combined numbers of these groups is believed to number into the thousands. As an example, during this period you had the rise and fall of Russian National Unity, founded by Alexander Barkashov, whose son would go on to fight with the pro-Russian separatists during the invasion of Ukraine. The movement advocated the expulsion of non-Russians and an increased role for traditional Russian institutions such as the Russian Orthodox Church. It also collaborated heavily with the FSB and kept a strong link between them and the central government. Russian National Unity would have member numbers of between 20 and 25,000. These delightful people have been convicted of serious racist crimes, such as in the case of the group in Tver who vandalized Jewish and Muslim graves, murdered and assaulted individuals belonging to ethnic minorities, and spread racial hatred, among other crimes. This body would eventually break up into smaller groups, but it was clear that the neo-Nazi ideology was incredibly strong throughout Russia. No less important is the role of neo-Nazis and other right-wing figures in Russia's onslaught against Ukraine. In 2014, the RO's Alexander Matyushin helped to terrorize supporters of the Ukrainian state in Donetsk on the eve of Russia's proxy war in eastern Ukraine. He went on to become a major field commander. Today, RO's Dmitry Steshin, a celebrated war correspondent for a mass circulation tabloid, disseminates lies blaming Ukrainian false flag operations for atrocities committed by Russian forces. The Kremlin's cultivation of domestic neo-Nazis is matched by its promotion of neo-Nazis in the West. Some have amplified anti-Western conspiracy theories as experts on RT, the Kremlin's cable TV propaganda channel. Others have served the Kremlin as monitors who applaud the conduct of fraudulent elections. Meanwhile, Ronaldo Nazzaro, an American, has been quietly running the base, the international neo-Nazi terrorist organization, from an apartment in St. Petersburg. Putin's weaponization of neo-Nazis was always a risky strategy, but it was not irrational. Unlike mainstream nationalists, who tend to support the idea of free elections, neo-Nazis reject democratic institutions and the very idea of human equality. For a dictator dismantling democracy and constructing an authoritarian regime, they were ideal accomplices. When it comes to Ukraine and the great Nazi peril that they supposedly represent, it should be pointed out the far right received only 2% of the vote in Ukraine's 2019 parliamentary elections, far less than in most of Europe. Others have drawn attention to Ukraine's Jewish president, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the efforts of the Ukrainian state to protect minorities like Crimean Tatars and LGBTQ+ people, who are subject to brutal persecution in Russia. So, as it stands, the Nazi question really should be put to bed by now. The Russian propaganda has effectively changed the international stance on Ukraine into one that is false and that feeds a narrative that strengthens their pathetic reason for going to war in the first place. I think the time has come for people to drop the Yookro Nazis titles and to start realizing that this alone is no reason for the bloodshed and destruction we have witnessed. But it goes further, not just in terms of the state's association with neo-Nazi groups but also its willingness to act with violence. When Hitler annexed the Sudetenland in 1938, he claimed to be doing so in order to protect the German-speaking people of that region who he said were being murdered by the native Czechoslovakians. Sound familiar? This excuse has been used extensively by the Kremlin regarding the Russian-speaking people of the Donbass and Luhansk. Furthermore, Hitler chose terror to underpin everything he did, killing off opposition, using subversive tactics and of course rounding up communities to be shipped off to concentration camps. Putin has been slightly different, in that he poisoned, manufactured reasons for imprisonment, bombed residential areas and of course rounded up people for forced deportation to Russia. At the end of the day, Putin's actions and reason for being are more sympathetic with the Nazi ideology than Kyiv could ever claim or appear to be. Ukraine is a functioning democracy and Russia is an autocracy that is slowly shedding its veil of a highly corrupt democracy. Thank you for watching.